Lisa sat at the kitchen table, having just finished reviewing her upcoming speech. She had gone through it repeatedly, searching for any significant flaw, but found none. In her 3-page notes, she not only outlined all her arguments but also anticipated every counter-argument and had responses ready. Ultimately, she concluded that with the speech, she couldn't lose. Perhaps she might not win, but she certainly couldn't lose. Briefly, she pondered what she had to lose, which brought a smile to her face. However, she realized it was too much to risk. Satisfied with her wording, she shifted her focus to timing. If she presented it to Dave slowly, it might resonate with his logical mind, leading to his agreement. However, that would also give him time to formulate counter-arguments. Having known him for 18 years, she acknowledged that in a battle of logic, he would likely prevail. Thus, the slow approach was out. Her preferred strategy remained shock and awe. Hit him hard, hit him fast, and secure his agreement before he could gather his thoughts. Was his agreement critical? Damn right. Without it, nothing would progress. That was the risk-free aspect. Nervously, Lisa stood up and busied herself in the kitchen, trying to distract herself from the inevitable pain she was about to cause her husband. He didn't deserve it, but she felt compelled to do it to get what she deserved. She justified her actions by reminding herself that he had backed her into a corner, leaving her no choice. Therefore, it was his fault. Lisa scanned the kitchen, trying to recall the last time she had been there alone on a weekday. It must have been at least 6 months ago. Before that, she was always the first to arrive home and welcome the kids back from school. What caused the change? It was simple. John. John was transferred from another office 7 months ago to become her boss. Initially, they maintained a typical boss-employee dynamic for a month. However, things shifted when he asked her to stay late one day and then treated her to dinner as a gesture of gratitude. They discovered they had many shared interests, despite him being 8 years younger and single. Their mutual appreciation for the arts, movies, and fashion deepened their connection. Gradually, the compliments on her work and appearance increased, leaving her flattered, but also concerned about aging. Their after-hours interactions became regular, progressing from work discussions to casual conversations over coffee or at the office. Within a month, they abandoned all pretense of work and spent evenings together. Within another month, his expressions of loneliness and dislike for dining alone led her to skip family dinners to accompany him to restaurants more frequently. By the 3rd month, their outings extended to movies and shows as well. It also encompassed numerous weekends when she toured out of town or local attractions. To justify her absence at home, she claimed there was a potential promotion on the horizon, and she aimed to distinguish herself by putting in extra hours. Though she felt a twinge of guilt for this deception, her husband, Dave, wholeheartedly backed her newfound ambition. Despite knowing it wasn't right for a married woman to act this way, after 17 years of selflessly being a mother, she felt entitled to a few hours for herself each day. When she was with John, she felt valued in a different way. While her husband constantly expressed appreciation, it had become routine over the years. Increasing her workload prompted Dave to step up and manage things at home. However, after finding the kids alone at home multiple times, he voiced concerns about their youngest, age 13, being unsupervised. Lisa reacted defensively, snapping at him that if he wasn't comfortable, he could reduce his hours. The next day, she woke up to find Dave already at work. That evening, she returned home to find him there, helping the kids with homework and cooking dinner. With a slight tremor in her voice, she thanked him for supporting her career. As her weekend work began, Dave once again stepped up, taking on the main responsibility of entertaining the kids. Rather than seeing it as a burden, he appeared to relish it and find renewed purpose in life. The kids enjoyed reconnecting with their dad, and everyone had a great time. Even their 17-year-old son sacrificed some of his time with friends to join his dad and siblings on outings. Until 3 months ago, Lisa's association with John had remained strictly platonic. However, one Saturday, following a pleasant lunch and a flurry of compliments, John proposed booking a hotel room for the afternoon. Initially dismissing it as a jest, Lisa's amusement faded when she realized John wasn't joking. It deeply unsettled her. Hastily, she concocted excuses and laughed it off, but inwardly she cursed John for jeopardizing their friendship with a sexual advance. She knew she would never betray her husband. The following Monday at work was disheartening for Lisa, as John treated her with distant professionalism. By week's end, she found herself longing for his presence. The absence of meaningful interactions, lunches, and compliments, despite her efforts to linger after work each day, weighed heavily on Lisa. She acknowledged that the acknowledgement of her professional and feminine strengths had become crucial to her self-esteem. Though Dave was attentive and complimentary, it lacked the same significance. Two incidents that week should have signaled obsession to Lisa. Firstly, on Wednesday, she returned home to find dinner only partially prepared, with Dave asking her to finish it while he fetched their eldest from soccer practice. Upon his return, Lisa remained seated where she was, causing dinner to be delayed. This led to their first confrontation. Dave questioned the worth of her work-focused dedication, prompting Lisa to lash out, venting her pent-up frustrations from feeling overlooked by John onto Dave. She had calmed down by bedtime, denying any issues when Dave inquired if they were all right. However, Dave noticed her distracted demeanor and refrained from pursuing intimacy, feeling increasingly rejected by her consistent rebuffs. On Friday afternoon, John approached Lisa and offered an apology. He attributed his behavior to being in close proximity to such an attractive and desirable woman while feeling lonely. Lisa accepted his apology, but made it clear she was committed to her marriage and intended to remain faithful to her husband. In response, John inquired if any of her colleagues would be open to helping him alleviate his frustration. This remark triggered a possessive reaction from Lisa, who promptly rejected the idea. Despite this exchange, they parted on amicable terms, with Lisa agreeing to meet him for lunch and a show the following day. The second trigger of obsession occurred when Lisa returned home on Friday evening to find Dave and the kids packing for a camping trip. When she questioned them about it, they explained that they had planned this long weekend getaway a month ago. They looked at her incredulously when she claimed to have no prior knowledge of it. They reminded her that they had discussed it over dinner all week, but she refused to believe them. Lisa insisted on rescheduling for the following weekend, but they refused, citing that this was the last opportunity before winter set in. Consequently, the family left for their trip without her, leaving Lisa feeling upset at home alone. Her only consolation was that their absence provided her with 3 days to reconcile with John. It hit Lisa hard the next day after the show when John announced he was unavailable for Sunday and Monday. Despite trying to reach her family, they were out of reach in an area with no cell service. Lisa remained upset upon their return. She refrained from blaming them for not informing her of their whereabouts, fearing she might have ignored their communication. That night, she declined intimacy with John, citing the need to be fresh for work. Alarm bells rang in her mind when Dave suggested her ambitions were driving a wedge between her and her family. After giving him a piece of her mind, she refocused on planning her week with John. She jolted awake before 3 a.m., realizing the harm that her actions and conversations were causing to her perfect marriage and family. The thought of Dave leaving and leaving her to raise the children alone sent a shiver down her spine. However, the idea of losing her loving and considerate husband was even more distressing. Determined to cool her extramarital friendship, she snuggled closer to Dave, finding comfort in his embrace. Though tempted to initiate intimacy as they used to, she refrained, mindful of his early wake-up time. Subconsciously sensing her need for closeness, Dave greeted her with a warm hug when she returned home later that night. Yet, under John's influence, Lisa couldn't fully reciprocate the affection. This set the stage for the following month. Within a week, things returned to normal with John, as did her marriage and family. However, it was a new kind of normal. While the four of them laughed, joked, and interacted, Lisa felt detached, unaware of the concerned looks Dave shot her way countless times each night. Eventually, Dave reached his breaking point and pleaded with her to abandon the promotion. He expressed his love for her and confessed his fear about the impact of her increased workload on their family. Unfortunately, he couldn't have chosen a worse day to pour out his feelings. On that very day, John had subtly but firmly stated his desire to maintain their friendship only if she agreed to take it to the next level. Lisa was deeply preoccupied. The thought of losing the ego-boosting compliments from John made her uneasy. As Dave begged and implored, Lisa wrestled with her decision. It was obvious that if she had to choose between John and her husband, Dave would prevail. However, she was desperate to avoid making that choice. She relied on both of them, one for stability and the other for validation of her ego. Even after her husband fell silent, Lisa utilized her considerable intellect to devise a solution without risks. By 2 a.m., she had a plan. The very next night, she explained it to John, emphasizing her steadfast commitment to her husband and her unwillingness to cheat. She outlined her scheme, enticing Dave into a three-way where John would conveniently become the third participant. Since the men had never met, it would appear as if John were chosen randomly. If successful, she would then figure out a way to spend time alone with John later, with Dave's approval, thus avoiding infidelity. However, she cautioned John that convincing Dave would take time and requested his patience. John hesitated briefly, weighing the months he had already invested in pursuing Lisa. Confident that once her self-imposed barrier was breached, she would be his whenever he desired. He agreed, warning her that he wouldn't wait indefinitely. Lisa was grateful for his consent, even allowing him to kiss her properly for the first time. However, she drew the line when he attempted to touch her breast. Angered by her own arousal, she firmly pushed his hand away, reiterating her commitment to fidelity, and they proceeded to dinner. Lisa didn't feel particularly anxious about discussing a certain topic with Dave. Their relationship had always been one of openness and truth, especially about their desires, and they had explored role-playing together numerous times over the years. However, feeling too exhausted to broach the subject that night, Lisa chose to masturbate after Dave had fallen asleep. The next night, the timing still didn't seem right, so she again waited until Dave was asleep before she began to pleasure herself. Lost in her fantasies about John, she couldn't suppress a soft moan, her arousal intensifying. Suddenly, her private moment was interrupted by Dave shifting towards her. "This seems a bit unfair, doesn't it?" Dave remarked. "Why? What's unfair about it?" Lisa asked, puzzled. "You lying there, pleasuring yourself, after you've been rejecting me for the past few months," Dave pointed out. Lisa was shocked. She hadn't realized it had been that long. "Has it really been that long, sweetheart?" she asked, disbelief in her voice. "Absolutely. Ever since you started chasing that promotion, you've either been too exhausted, too irritable, or simply brushed me off whenever I tried to initiate something," Dave explained. Feeling a twinge of guilt, Lisa saw this as an opportunity to finally talk about the issue that had been on her mind. She took a moment to justify to herself how her infatuation with John was affecting their marriage. Ready to open up, she looked for the right way to start this delicate conversation. However, so wrapped up in her thoughts, she didn't notice when Dave sighed and turned away again. She realized that suggesting a three-way after a 4-month dry spell might bruise Dave's ego, implying that he alone no longer satisfied her. No, the safer approach was to reconnect with Dave first. Rolling towards him, she pulled him close, but he started snoring once on his back. Lisa felt too embarrassed to even continue masturbating. She needed to release her pent-up desires before Lisa fretted. Before John entered her life, there was nothing wrong with her marriage or Zek's life. After 2 days of inaction, John seemed a bit miffed with Lisa the following day. She had to kiss him again to prevent him from criticizing her. This time, he behaved and refrained from making any advances. However, it left her feeling aroused enough to passionately kiss Dave when she returned home, and even caressed his groin while doing so. Dave's eyes lit up, and they didn't wait for the kids to go to bed. As soon as dinner ended, they retreated to the small outdoor shed where Dave had installed their jacuzzi, his solution to maintaining a healthy bed life as their children grew older. Once inside, Dave eagerly initiated intimacy. When Lisa jokingly remarked on his impatience, Dave defended himself, explaining that he didn't want to give her a chance to change her mind. Dave performed as usual, but Lisa only reached climax when she closed her eyes and recalled the sensation of John's bulge pressing against her leg earlier that afternoon. The next morning, Saturday, Dave woke her up in the way she used to enjoy, his tongue exploring her intimately. While Dave likely assumed she used the pillow to stifle her moans, in reality, even with her eyes shut, Lisa struggled to pretend Dave was John. It was a pleasurable yet perplexing experience for her. That evening, she felt confident enough to bring up the sensitive topic with her husband. After praising his recent performance, she cautiously broached the subject. Despite their many years together, she admitted that things had started to feel a bit routine, and she had developed a fascination with the idea of a three-way. With Dave's open-mindedness, he immediately proposed they role-play it. This response exceeded Lisa's expectations, so they returned to the jacuzzi. After each encounter, they collapsed on the provided mattress, thoroughly exhausted. In fact, the revived intimacy with Dave nearly persuaded Lisa to abandon her plan. About a week and a half into what she considered Dave's adjustment period, John grew increasingly impatient, and the compliments began to dwindle. Lisa found herself needing to kiss him almost daily just to maintain his interest. Eventually, even that wasn't sufficient, and she sensed John withdrawing once again. 2 days after a lengthy session in their jacuzzi shed, Lisa felt ready to broach a sensitive topic with Dave. She had been building up the courage to discuss their sexual adventures and what she envisioned for their future. However, before she could bring it up, Dave initiated the conversation. "Sweetheart, the past few weeks have been amazing. I found it incredibly arousing to have our guest join us in our intimacy. Have you thought about reciprocating by being intimate with her as well? How do you see this fitting into our role play?" Dave inquired, full of anticipation. Lisa was shocked, realizing there had been a significant misunderstanding between them. "What? Do you think I want a three-way with another woman?" she responded, confused and surprised. Dave, sounding confused himself, asked, "Isn't that what this has been leading up to?" Lisa understood then that they hadn't clearly communicated their desires, leading to this confusion. "No, Dave, my thoughts were on including another man," Lisa clarified, realizing the moment was ripe for an honest conversation. "Oh," Dave reacted, prompting Lisa to seize the opportunity and express her desires more explicitly. "Listen, honey, I've been really excited these past few weeks. Is there any chance we could make my fantasy a reality? With another man, I mean," Lisa proposed, hopeful yet nervous. Dave pondered her suggestion carefully. "Well, Lisa, honestly, I don't see that ending well for us. I thought we both liked the idea of including another woman. The thought of another man doesn't sit well with me," he admitted, his discomfort evident. "What if it's something I feel strongly about, Dave?" Lisa pressed, seeking his openness to her perspective. Dave considered her words. "I'd need time to think about it. The only way I might consider it is if we could also include another woman at a different time," he suggested, trying to find a middle ground. "No, you wouldn't have to interact with her. That could be just for me," Lisa offered, attempting to negotiate. "I said no, Lisa. The idea of you with another woman upsets me. Let's drop this idea. It's off the table," Dave asserted firmly. "Then that answers my question. We can't include another guy either," Lisa realized, recognizing the impasse in their conversation. The finality in Dave's tone signaled the end of her hopes for this particular fantasy. The next day, when Lisa spoke to John about the conversation, he was clearly upset, accusing her of not trying hard enough and then giving her the cold shoulder for the remainder of the week. Frustrated and disappointed, Lisa was left to deal with the fallout of their failed negotiation and the tension it created. On Monday, John requested a private conversation with Lisa after everyone else had left. He appeared genuinely saddened as he expressed his inability to continue being around such a beautiful woman who wasn't available to him sexually. Lisa found herself forced to choose between him and her husband, and she chose her husband, despite the pain it caused John. He respected her decision, bid her goodbye with a kiss, and asked her to remember him fondly. He understood that their relationship had to revert to a professional one and began to walk away. "Wait," John halted and turned back. "Give me another week, please." "What do you have in mind?" inquired Lisa. "I'm not sure, Lisa. Just grant me a week to come up with something." With another kiss, they parted ways. Observing Lisa's return to her distracted state over the weekend, Dave contemplated her recent mood swings and her newfound fixation on three-ways. Now, he had another concern. Why was her lipstick smudged when she returned home late on Friday? It was time to do some investigation. Having had ample time over the weekend to mull things over, Lisa eagerly approached John after work on Monday. His eyes brightened as she explained her plan. However, midway through, he interjected. John raised a cautious note as they discussed their plans. "You know, Lisa, he might expect something in return for this." Lisa, mindful of her boundaries, replied confidently, There are certain concessions I'm willing to make, but I also have clear lines that I won't cross. We'll just have to see how things unfold." John, wanting to ensure clarity and commitment, warned, "Just remember, dear, if he ultimately doesn't agree, then I'm pulling out of our plans altogether." "I understand, John. If that's the outcome, I'm prepared to accept it," Lisa acknowledged. John expressed his understanding, offering himself as a practice subject if needed. With his implied approval, Lisa spent the majority of Tuesday and Wednesday at work, devising her strategy. She began with the fundamental premise that whatever action she took must pose no risk to her marriage and family. She likened it to a game of poker, where she had won a $1,000 pot and was unwilling to risk it. She desired to secure it in a time-delayed safe, ensuring its safety even from herself. This way, she could continue playing, knowing she might win another $1,000. But even if she lost, she still retained the on Wednesday evening. John treated her to dinner for a complete rehearsal. Following the main course, he instructed her to give it her best shot. "Well, John, I've decided to come at him strong and swiftly tomorrow night. I'll begin by expressing my deep love for him, emphasizing how much I cherish our children. You know, mentioning their future milestones like graduations, weddings, and grandchildren's christenings. Then, I'll bring up our retirement plans that we've discussed." At this point, John's mind began to wander. He noted how typically women delved straight into emotional rhetoric, a tactic that might sway another woman, but often missed the mark with men, who tended to lean towards rationality over emotion. "Are you paying attention, John?" Lisa's voice broke through his thoughts. "Of course, Lisa," John replied, refocusing his attention. "Following that," Lisa continued, "I'll remind him that I offered him a chance to join in on harmless fun, which he declined. I'll inform him that he's left me with no choice but to seek affection elsewhere, starting with a rendezvous on Friday night. Before he can fully process this, I'll stress that it's purely physical, just a bit of emotional enjoyment. I apologize, John. I might need to stretch the truth a bit there. If he truly loves me, he'll allow it. I estimate I have about a 70-30 chance of him agreeing right then and there. What do you think of the plan so far?" John privately estimated the odds to be much lower than that, but kept it to himself. He figured his chances of seducing this older woman were less than 50%, but the thrill of the pursuit was worth it. He believed he could enjoy it once without any risk. However, engaging in repeated encounters would exponentially increase the risk of being caught and losing his job for having a sexual relationship with a subordinate. Why take that risk more than once? He had been in similar situations before and realized that he had already experienced 90% of the enjoyment. By increasing Lisa's chances of success, he might get the remaining 10%. John was aware that seeing Lisa more could lead to trouble at work, especially since it wasn't allowed for a boss to have a romantic relationship with someone they supervise. He had been in similar spots before and knew he had already enjoyed most of what there was to enjoy. By helping Lisa succeed, he thought he might enjoy a little bit more. John mentioned that if he were in Lisa's husband's place, he might have suggested they have an open relationship. But Lisa was totally against the idea of sharing her husband with anyone else. She said that if her husband suggested such a thing, she would rather end their marriage than accept it. John then suggested that Lisa had a way to stop her husband from making any moves she didn't like. He was talking about her threatening to divorce him and the possibility of him not getting to see their kids much if they split up. But Lisa didn't like the idea of using such threats, even just as a bluff. John tried to convince Lisa to stand up for herself, arguing that the mess they were in was her husband's fault for not agreeing to her suggestions in the first place. He held her hands, looked into her eyes, and told her she deserved to find her own happiness after years of putting her family first. Lisa started to think maybe John had a point. However, she made it clear that everything depended on her husband Dave being okay with their plan. If she thought Dave wasn't on board, she would back out. John assured Lisa it was a situation where they couldn't lose, although he doubted the reality of Lisa's hopes. As they waited for dessert, Lisa took the chance to jot down some thoughts for her plan. After they finished eating, John walked her to her car, and they said goodnight with a kiss. This moment wrapped up their discussion on navigating their complicated situation, focusing on personal desires and the boundaries they were willing or unwilling to cross. On this occasion, When John gently held her, she offered no resistance. Instead, she subtly moved closer to him. She could sense his reaction through his clothing, which nearly overwhelmed her. John momentarily considered taking things further, yet he decided that it was better to maintain the playful atmosphere between them. "Okay, love, I'll book us a room for Friday night. Can we go to your place?" "I've never even seen it," John said, with a hint of curiosity and excitement in his voice. "No way," she replied with a laugh, the playful tone evident in her response. "The walls are way too thin, and you'll be screaming way too much. I can assure you of that." On trembling legs, Lisa went home to her family. She was even more distracted than normal. At one point, she realized she was alone, and everyone had gone to bed. Consequently, she slept in the next day, and only woke just in time to see the kids off. She reminded them she had arranged for Dave's parents to pick them up for a sleepover that night, and checked they had all they needed. She'd arranged the day off. She had to call John at least 5 times to maintain her courage during the day. She knew her major Achilles heel was her inability to lie convincingly. The obvious question Dave would raise when given her ultimatum was, did she already have someone in mind? In front of a mirror, she practiced saying no. She intended going out and allowing herself to be seduced. Anything else would spur questions she wasn't at all comfortable with. She convinced herself that by remaining cool, calm, and collected, she could pull it off. So, here she was, sitting at the kitchen table, waiting to ambush her husband who was due any minute. It was Thursday night, 24 hours short of a much-anticipated event. The kids were overnighting at their grandparents'. Lisa was totally ready. She just kept repeating to herself, "Shakana, be firm. Can't lose. I deserve this." Dave walked into the house at 5:30 p.m., an hour and a half later than his new usual time of 4 p.m. He had likely timed his arrival knowing that Lisa had the day off. Upon entering, he noticed Lisa sitting at the kitchen table, a 3/4 empty bottle of wine in front of her. Knowing that she rarely indulged in more than one glass, Dave immediately sensed the gravity of the situation. It was clear to him that this was not just a special occasion, but also a moment when Lisa might be more open and vulnerable. "Hi, Elise. What are we celebrating? Did you get that promotion?" Dave asked, trying to gauge the situation with a mix of curiosity and concern in his voice. "We aren't celebrating, darling, at least not yet. Please sit down." "We have to talk, Dave," Lisa responded, her tone serious and inviting a deeper conversation. Lisa was taken aback by her own nerves, despite the Dutch courage she had imbibed. She found herself more anxious than anticipated. Silently, she repeated her mantra. "Stay firm, Lisa, you can't lose. You deserve this." Dave beat her to the conversation. "I'm guessing this has something to do with your recent distraction. Maybe it's related to the fact that you've been largely absent from family life for the past 6 months. Or perhaps it's about the 5-month dry spell we've had in the bedroom, except for those 2 blissful weeks." "Dave, No, let me guess, Lisa. You still love me deeply. You envision a future together, attending our children's milestones and eventually enjoying retirement in luxury. But despite all that, because I didn't agree to your covert 3-way plan, you now plan to cheat on me with your lover. Am I right? Is it happening tonight or tomorrow night?" Dave paused and alarm bells rang loudly in Lisa's mind. He had just summarized the first page and a half of her notes with uncanny accuracy. In a crisis, Dave's clarity of thought surpassed hers, a fact he had demonstrated twice before when he saved their children's lives while she froze. She was thoroughly shaken. In a panic, she reverted to her rehearsed speech. "But I deserve this, Dave. It would only be physical, Dave. Just a bit of fun to spice things up for us emotionally." In a state of panic, Lisa proceeded with her speech, reciting a section that John had suggested the night before, although she hadn't memorized it as well as the rest. She warned Dave against sleeping with other women, threatening divorce and the loss of access to their children, along with financial consequences. Mid-sentence, Lisa noticed a shift in Dave's expression, which was neither guilt nor resignation, but rather intense and stormy. Confused by Dave's sudden change, Lisa found herself confronted with questions about names. Dave's insistence on knowing the identity of the person involved indicated the seriousness of the situation. Caught off guard and unprepared for this line of questioning, Lisa hesitated before revealing John's name, insisting that he was not the type to engage in such behavior. Dave's interrogation intensified, accusing Lisa of seeing John behind his back and citing her recent behaviors as evidence of infidelity. Despite Lisa's protests of innocence, Dave remained skeptical, questioning if John had influenced her decisions and humiliated him personally. Lisa found herself in a difficult position, feeling both deeply insulted and scared because the discussion with Dave had taken a turn she hadn't expected. She was struggling with how to prove her loyalty to him. She tried to explain that her late nights and weekends out were innocent, consisting only of conversations and dinners with John. But Dave didn't believe her, pointing to a specific instance when Lisa came home looking disheveled, suggesting that her appearance was indicative of a sexual encounter. In a state of desperation, Lisa raised her voice in an attempt to convince Dave of her innocence, insisting that there had been no infidelity on her part, only talking, dinners, and some kissing. She pleaded with him to believe that she would never betray their marriage. Dave, overwhelmed by the situation, covered his face with his hands, a gesture of despair. Lisa, who had never seen Dave cry, watched him closely, recognizing the signs of someone trying to hide their emotional pain. The realization that she could be the cause of such deep hurt in Dave was horrifying to her. The thought of losing everything over a misunderstanding filled her with panic and disbelief. In a desperate attempt to salvage the situation, Lisa recalled the last part of her prepared defense, often thought of as her ultimate escape tactic. She was ready to abandon all her plans with John and fully retreat from the actions that had led to this crisis, believing that such a concession could repair the damage. However, before she could present this solution, Dave preemptively concluded that Lisa's actions had irrevocably damaged their marriage and family, expressing a profound sense of betrayal and grief. He even accused her of threatening to separate him from their children. As Dave walked out the door, his words resonated with a tone of finality that alarmed Lisa even more. She was momentarily paralyzed by the gravity of the situation. By the time she mustered the courage to follow him, Dave was almost at his car. She hadn't had the opportunity to offer her last-ditch solution. Close to his car, she tried to assert her innocence once again. Dave paused, but didn't turn to face her. His response underscored his view of her actions as unforgivable. He equated her spending time away from the family, lying about her reasons, going to dinner with John, and kissing him as forms of cheating. With a tone of resignation, Dave declared the end of their relationship, leaving Lisa to confront the reality of her choices and their impact on her marriage. Lisa dropped to her knees, too stunned and overwhelmed to hold herself up. She watched her husband drive away, too shocked to shed a tear. Can't lose? She reflexively recalled her preparations for their confrontation. The idea of discussing the end of their marriage had only crossed her mind when she made her hollow threat. She had never imagined Dave could consider ending it too. For a little over an hour, Lisa allowed herself to wallow in self-pity. The realization that she might have irreparably damaged a wonderful relationship was too daunting to face, so she pushed it to the back of her mind. Yet, another concern lingered heavily. Dave's parting words and his demeanor had triggered alarm bells in her head. For the first time, she worried about how her ultimatum had truly affected her husband, a man devoted to her and their family. She feared he might harm himself. Would he? She had made it clear what they both knew. In a divorce, he would likely lose custody of their children and a significant portion of his assets. They were aware of cases where ex-wives denied access to children, aided by biased court systems. Would he consider harming himself? Damn. Yes. Panic set in. Dave didn't answer his cell phone. Lisa called her in-laws to check if Dave was with them, but he had left. They were perplexed. Dave had only stayed briefly before departing after hugging their 3 children. Lisa hurriedly drove to every bar she could think of, searching for his car. She was so preoccupied that she ran out of gas and had to call her dad for help. Recognizing her distress, he drove her home. There, she broke down and confided in her parents that Dave had left her. She witnessed the pain reflected in her mother's eyes. Her father's remarks made his opinion of his son-in-law clear. Eventually, her mother relented, agreeing it was best for Lisa to return home, and dropped her off at her car. Lisa went home and in the early hours of the morning fell asleep on the couch. Nightmares jolted her awake at 7 a.m. Before she could shake off the grogginess, panic engulfed her. She frantically checked her phone for messages, finding none. She dialed Dave's cell, but it went straight to voicemail, as if turned off or out of battery. After all, his charger lay beside hers on the kitchen counter. She called his workplace, learning he hadn't shown up. Contacting the police, she explained why her husband had left, but they offered no assistance. By then, it was 8 a.m., so she reached out to every friend in Dave's address book, yet none had seen him. She spent the entire day driving to every conceivable place, returning home every couple of hours to check for Dave's car, which never appeared, and his cell remained unreachable. Reality briefly intruded when she received a message from John. Hyatt, room 707, 6 p.m. The message sent shivers down her spine, but she suppressed her reaction. Dave's parents called next, still unaware of his whereabouts and inquiring about the children. Lisa asked them to care for the kids temporarily. Back at home, Lisa collapsed on the couch, overwhelmed with sorrow. She must have dozed off again, waking abruptly at 3:30 a.m., consumed by despair. She attempted to conjure Dave's image but failed, feeling an irrational certainty that he was dead. She feared losing her sanity but pushed the thought aside. With dread, she returned to her car, finding her cell on the passenger seat, neglected. There was one message from her eldest and 6 from John. She listened to her child's message, expressing longing for her mother, but ignored the others. Until around 10 a.m., she scoured potential local suicide sites, searching for Dave's car, bridges, ravines, secluded areas, but found nothing. Lisa, feeling desperate, contacted Dave's parents again, but they still had no updates. She reached out to all of his friends once more. This time, when she called Dave's oldest friend, who happened to be a former boss of his, she sensed he was not entirely forthcoming. Suspecting something was amiss, she searched for his address and decided to drive by his house to check for Dave's car. Situated in an affluent neighborhood, she located the house but found no sign of Dave. As she drove away, her attention was caught by a distinctively marked Lexus parked 3 houses down. It belonged to John. The car was stationed outside another lavish residence, among several others. Suddenly, the notion of seeking solace from a man who, above all, was her friend, appealed to her. Parking her car, she approached the front door. She could hear subdued revelry emanating from inside, indicating a Saturday afternoon gathering. Next to the door was a panel integrated into the wall, featuring a security keypad, doorbell, and intercom button. She pressed the button. When Lisa arrived at her company, she was greeted by the general manager, Mr. Goldsmith. She asked to see John Stanhope, noticing his car outside. Mr. Goldsmith, recognizing her, invited her inside, but Lisa, conscious of her messy look, preferred to wait outside. Mr. Goldsmith agreed to fetch John for her. Shortly after, John came out to meet Lisa. He quickly made sure they were alone before he embraced her, kissed her, and then held her close against the wall. Lisa, overwhelmed by her emotions, sought comfort in John's arms, moving from a kiss to a tight hug. John was eager to understand what had transpired the night before, prompting Lisa to share her distressing encounter with Dave, who had accused her of infidelity and seemed to know about her plans with John, leading to fears that Dave might have done something drastic due to his disappearance since that confrontation. Their intense moment was abruptly interrupted by an angry woman bursting out, accusing John of betrayal and lamenting their move to escape similar issues, suggesting a history of problems. Lisa, acting on impulse, stepped in to prevent any potential harm, positioning herself between John and the irate woman. The enraged woman, seeing Lisa as an easy target, swung around and delivered a powerful backhand that sent Lisa crashing into the wall, accidentally pressing the intercom button and letting out a cry of pain. Stunned, Lisa slumped to the ground while the angry woman continued her assault on John. The situation escalated until the company's boss intervened, gently but firmly restraining John's wife and admonishing her for resorting to violence. After briefly addressing the situation, the boss instructed John and Lisa to meet with him in his office on Monday at 9 o'clock. With that, he led John's wife back inside, leaving John overcome with emotion. He rushed to his car and drove off, leaving Lisa still reeling from the ordeal. Feeling overwhelmed and distraught, Lisa eventually managed to gather herself and went home. She reached out to her mom, who convinced her father to pick her up and take her to their family home. Lisa spent the night crying and slept most of the next day before starting to cry again. On Monday, the general manager of Lisa's company discussed the situation with the HR manager. They couldn't take action until they heard Lisa's side of the story, and they also agreed not to fire John until his wife decided what she wanted to do. The boss knew John's wife had taken the kids and gone to her mother's house. They decided to give Lisa until the end of the day tomorrow to contact them before considering her in breach of her contract. The HR manager questioned whether they believed John's claim that he and Lisa had not had sex, to which the boss responded that it was still considered cheating regardless. They lamented the complexities of human relationships, with the HR manager expressing frustration at people's inability to be content with what they have. By Monday evening, Lisa felt well enough to call her in-laws to check on the children. She believed she could face seeing the kids now, but dreaded facing Dave's parents, fearing their son might be dead because of her. She planned to find a way to convince them to drop the children home without confronting her. The word shocked hardly captured Lisa's emotions when Dave's mother informed her that all 3 kids refused to see her and threatened to call the police if she showed up. Before Lisa could respond, the call abruptly ended. Lisa woke up disoriented, lying on the kitchen floor, stiff and sore. Realizing she had wet herself shocked her further. After a long shower, she noticed the setting sun, realizing it had been just after sunset when she made the call. Glancing at her phone, she saw it was 6 p.m. Tuesday. She had been out of it for nearly 24 hours. What had happened? Despite feeling fresher than she had in days, Lisa was determined to regain control of her life. Though the possibility of Dave's death threatened to overwhelm her, she pushed the thought aside. Drawing strength from her children, she decided to visit her in-laws unannounced and bring the kids back home. Upon arriving at Dave's parents' house, she was surprised to find her own parents' car parked there. As she pulled up, they emerged from the door, swiftly guiding her back to her car. Lisa resisted, demanding to see her children. Her father informed her they weren't there and instructed her to follow them home, which she reluctantly did. Upon arriving home, Lisa found her mother preparing tea in the kitchen and immediately inquired about her children's whereabouts. Her father reassured her that Dave had the kids and was alive, indicating that they had just spoken with him. Lisa then asked about Dave's location, prompting her parents to exchange uncomfortable glances before admitting that he had taken the kids to meet some people. Lisa's mother interrupted impatiently, expressing disappointment and shame in Lisa's actions, siding with Dave's version of events over Lisa's account. Lisa felt ashamed and remained silent as her mother continued, mentioning Dave's encounter with an old friend named Deborah Harris, causing Lisa great concern. Lisa knew that Dave and Deborah had separated when she went to a business college far from their hometown, and Deborah's recent divorce confirmed Lisa's fears. Her parents revealed that when Deborah saw Dave's state, she took him home, where he had been staying since. Furthermore, Lisa's parents informed her that Dave had taken the kids to meet Deborah and her children to see if they got along. They assured Lisa that nothing had happened between Dave and Deborah before this, but they seemed to be getting along well now. Feeling outraged, Lisa insisted that Dave had to give her a chance. However, her parents recounted Dave's perspective, stating that he felt devastated by Lisa's lies about working late while cheating with another man. Lisa's father emphasized that cheating wasn't just about physical intimacy, but also included lying and engaging in intimate conversations with another man, pointing out instances that Dave had found suspicious, such as Lisa's smeared lipstick and her notes detailing plans to manipulate him. Lisa protested, claiming she didn't mean to threaten Dave, but her father expressed disbelief and disappointment in her actions, highlighting the emotional toll they had taken on Dave and the family. Lisa returned to silence, her gaze falling to the table as she observed both her parents shaking their heads. In the icy disapproval emanating from them, she perceived what Dave must have felt. The web of lies, the deceit, the disrespect, and the emotional chasm that had grown between them over the past 6 months became starkly clear. She realized that her marriage was beyond repair. Her parents allowed her some time to process it all before her mother spoke up. "How are the kids and I going to survive without Dave?" Lisa inquired, her voice tinged with worry. Her parents exchanged a somber glance, prompting her father to nod at her mother, who took a deep breath before delivering Dave's message. "Lisa, Dave has been grappling with the idea for the past 5 days, wondering if the children would be better off with you or with him. However, due to the threats you've made against him, he feels he can't risk leaving them with you." Her mother glanced at her father again, seeking his support, which he provided by squeezing her hand gently. "We have to be honest with you, Lisa. We share his concerns," her father added. "From our perspective, if we were to support you, there's a possibility we might lose access to our only grandchildren." Lisa was taken aback, needing a moment to absorb the weight of their words. As frustration brewed within her, she couldn't help but voice her dismay. "So you're siding with him?" she accused, feeling a sense of betrayal. Her father's response was swift. "You initiated this, Lisa." But Lisa remained undeterred. "I'll fight all of you. The courts tend to favor the mother in custody battles. He can't prove I cheated because I didn't." "Lisa, it's not about proving anything," her mother interjected. "Dave simply wants out of the marriage. The children are old enough for their preferences to matter in court. And let me tell you, if the court had asked them tonight, you wouldn't stand a chance. And if I win, you'll likely lose custody rights for good." The gravity of her mother's words sank in, leaving Lisa reeling with the harsh reality of her situation. With her last bridge burnt, Lisa ran to her car and they both screamed off. Epilogue. 2 weeks later, an interim court order was issued. It favored Dave due to his stable employment, strong bond with the children, 6-month role as primary caregiver, and stable living situation. Additionally, the children's preferences were considered, enhancing his proposed visitation rights. On the opposing side stood Lisa, financially insecure with no job or references, unable to afford the home's buyout. The judge's decision was made with confidence. As the mandatory 12-month separation period ended and the divorce was finalized, Lisa regained much of her former self. Her parents forgave her, and she dedicated herself to being a devoted mother, especially during fortnight sessions. She even agreed to attend a wake with Dave and his new fiancée upon receiving the final divorce papers. Though she received a harsh email from John, blaming her for his divorce and job loss, she attributed the failure of her marriage to her own greed. She realized she had been discontented with what she had and sought more. The only lingering issue affecting her otherwise resigned contentment were the recurring nightmares, gradually diminishing from nightly to once or twice a week. One particularly unsettling dream featured a choir singing, "Shakina, be firm, can't lose, I deserve this." Yet nowadays, she found solace in being able to return to sleep relatively easily by reminding herself that achieving 1 out of 4 goals wasn't so bad after all.